Once the center of global attention and celebration, these Olympic venues now stand as haunting reminders of the past. From massive stadiums overtaken by nature to once vibrant villages left in decay, these sites tell stories of glory, neglect, and change. Join me, we're going to take a look at 15 fascinating histories of abandoned Olympic venues. Starting with number 15. The Hellen Olympic Canoe Slalom Center, which is in the southern suburbs of Athens, Greece, was built as part of a massive infrastructure project for the city to host the games, and it was designed specifically for the canoe slalom competition. It featured an artificial water course that was designed to simulate challenging river rapids. With powerful pumps used to create the right conditions, this facility is thought to have cost around $45 million as part of Greece's more than $10 billion investment for the 2004 Olympics. Unlike other venues that attracted local athletes or were repurposed, this slalom center struggled to stay in use. The sport of canoe slalom had limited popularity in Greece, and the high cost of maintaining such a specialized facility made it impractical. This, along with the economic crisis that struck Greece in the late 2000s, meant that continued funding for the venue soon dried up. The once stunning course became overgrown with weeds, and the artificial rapids were turned off for good. It wasn't the only facility in the complex that would suffer a fate like this, but as such a specialized venue, it's one of the clearest examples of how difficult it can be to ensure a long-term legacy for every Olympic sport. Efforts have been made to redevelop the site, including plans to transform the area into a major urban park and residential complex, but whatever happens, it'll never be used as a slalom course again, which is a great shame for Athens and the sport in general. Number 14. The Barra Olympic Park in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Barra Olympic Park, which is in Rio de Janeiro, was the centerpiece of the 2016 Summer Olympics. Covering over 290 acres, the park was home to 9 venues and hosted a variety of events, from swimming and basketball to gymnastics and tennis. It was built on a former racetrack. The park was central to Rio's Olympic legacy plan. Architects and planners intended for it to be a long-lasting public space for sports and leisure, with plans for some venues to be repurposed as schools or community centers. The area did have state-of-the-art facilities like the Rio Olympic Arena and the Tennis Center and the Olympic Village, which was next to the park. It was marketed as a luxurious residential complex for use after the games. But after the games finished, though, the park fell into disuse, and many of its venues were left abandoned or poorly maintained. Brazil's economy was pretty difficult in the lead-up to the games, with a deep recession and widespread corruption scandals leading to concerns about whether the events would even be able to be held. The Olympics themselves faced allegations of corruption, with inflated budgets and contracts awarded under strange circumstances, and by the time the games ended, the government was dealing with financial crises, which left little room for maintenance and repurposing of Olympic facilities. The maintenance costs for such a place were simply too high, and there was very little political will or funding to address the issue. Venues like the Velodrome and the Tennis Center were left to deteriorate, with broken seats, overgrown weeds, and vandalized structures throughout. Even the Olympic Village, which was meant to be a symbol of urban renewal, struggled to attract any buyers. It's a good example of how much planning is needed to ensure an Olympic development continues to be beneficial in the years following the Games, as Barra Park wasn't easily accessible to the majority of Rio's population. Unlike venues in densely populated areas, Barra Olympic Park was isolated, meaning its potential as a community space was limited from the outset. So there's very little chance that the grand plans for it would have ever become a reality, even if the funds had been available. Number 13. Sarajevo Bobsleigh and Luge Track in Yugoslavia. The Sarajevo Bobsleigh and Luge Track, which is on the slopes of Mount Trević, which overlooks Sarajevo, was built for the 1984 Winter Olympics that were held in what was then Yugoslavia. It featured intricate curves and drops designed to challenge the world-best bobsledders and lugers, and with an estimated cost of around $8.5 million, it became one of the most popular and exciting venues that year. The Games were hailed as a major success and a unifying event for the population of Yugoslavia, with the track and other Olympic venues being seen as a legacy that would inspire future generations and establish Sarajevo's status on the global stage. But things would soon change. By the early 1990s, the Bosnian War brought large-scale destruction to Sarajevo, including the area surrounding the mountain. The bobsleigh track on the front lines of the conflict was used by Bosnian Serb forces as a strategic artillery position, and the concrete structure bore the brunt of shelling and fighting, leaving it heavily damaged and riddled with bullet holes. In the following years, though, nature began to reclaim the site, with weeds and trees growing back through the cracked concrete. And graffiti artists also found the track, turning its ruins into a blank canvas for them to cover. Today, though, it is covered in colorful murals that create a strange environment, with the destruction of wartime still clearly visible. But the cost of repair for the venue have so far been too great, and while some parts of it are sometimes used for informal events like downhill biking, its full revival as an Olympic facility remains unlikely. Number 12. The Olympic Village in Berlin, Germany. The Olympic Village in Berlin is what remains of the 1936 Summer Olympics, which was arguably the most controversial Olympic Games ever because of its use as Nazi propaganda. Located in Elchtal, about 8.5 miles or 14 kilometers to the west of Berlin, the village was designed to house athletes from around the world during the Games. The 1936 Olympics themselves, which were organized under Adolf Hitler's regime, were intended to display Nazi Germany's might and cultural superiority. The Olympic Village was built as a modern complex to accommodate over 3,600 male athletes and featured dormitories, training facilities, and a swimming pool. Designed by architect Werner March, who also designed Berlin's Olympic Stadium, this village was both functional and architecturally advanced, in line with the Nazi ideology of order and strength. The most famous building in the complex was the Hindenburg House, which was a massive dining hall where athletes from different nations would eat together. After the Games, the village's role as a symbol of international unity was soon shattered. With the outbreak of World War II, it was repurposed by the German military. It became a barracks and a training center for Wehrmacht soldiers, and as a result, during the war, the village suffered significant damage from Allied bombings. Following Germany's defeat in 1945, the venue then fell under Soviet control, as the Elchtal area became part of East Germany. The Soviet Army used the Olympic Village as a military base and training facility and made further changes to its original design, with many of the buildings being neglected or repurposed. After the withdrawal of Soviet forces in 1992, the Olympic Village was then left abandoned. For decades, the site remained in a state of disrepair, and this allowed dormitories, dining halls, and athletic facilities to be overtaken by nature. Now, graffiti, broken windows, and overgrown vegetation have turned the village into a shadow of its past glory. Number 11. The Aquatic Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. The Aquatic Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, was built for the 2016 Summer Olympics. It was a centerpiece of the city's ambitious plans to host the Games. Located in the Barra Olympic Park, it was where the swimming, diving, and water polo events were held. But even during the Olympics, this was a controversial venue. Capable of holding 15,000 people, it had a temporary design with modular seating. The idea was to dismantle the stadium after the Games and reuse its materials to create smaller community swimming pools across the city. However, the construction and operation of the stadium was troubled by difficulties from the start. The cost of the project ballooned to an estimated $38 million, and it was criticized for its expense in a country that was dealing with economic issues and political instability. During the Games, the Aquatic Stadium faced further issues, such as the discoloration of the diving pool, which turned into a worrying shade of green because of poor water quality management. Organizers said the problem was a chemical imbalance caused by the use of hydrogen peroxide, which neutralized the chlorine in the water. But this was an embarrassing incident that had widespread media attention, overshadowed the athletic events, and had highlighted the organizational troubles of the Rio Olympics. Well, after the Games, the promised transformation of the Aquatic Stadium never happened. The structure was left mostly intact, and the plan to reuse its materials for community pools became impossible because of the lack of funding. Within months, the facility fell into disrepair. Weeds and trash began to accumulate, and the structure deteriorated rapidly under Rio's tropical climate. Without maintenance, the stadium became a wasted opportunity. Number 10. Grenoble Ski Jump Tower in France. The Grenoble Ski Jump Tower in France, which was built for the 1968 Winter Olympics, is on the hills which overlook the city of Grenoble. It was one of the standout venues for the Games and provided the perfect backdrop for what is one of the blue ribbon winter sports. But today the structure lies abandoned, and it's just a reminder of what once happened there. The 1968 Winter Olympics was a major moment in the history of the Games. Grenoble, which is a city in the French Alps, was chosen as the host to show France's ability in winter sports. but perhaps most importantly, its regeneration following the Second World War. The ski jump was built in Saint-Nazaire, which is an area known for its incredible views and challenging slopes. The facility featured a 295-foot or 90-meter ski jump, allowing athletes to perform huge leaps through the air, with space for thousands of spectators to watch it up close. The games themselves were a major success, with the ski jumping events among the highlights, with the jump venue in particular becoming a place of national pride. After the games, however, it did struggle to find a purpose. Unlike other sports facilities, ski jumps require consistent maintenance and are hugely expensive to operate. With the way that they're highly specialized, serving only a small community of athletes, it's difficult to justify the cost. So, despite initial hopes of hosting future competitions, the tower saw little use after 1968. By the 1980s, the site had fallen into disrepair, and attempts to revitalize it for training or smaller events prevented by logistical challenges and financial issues. The remote location made it difficult to access, and advancements in ski jump design now mean that the structure is outdated. In recent years, though, the tower's become a popular site for urban explorers, of course, and some historians. It remains now covered in graffiti and surrounded by alpine forests, offering memories of a high point in France's sporting heritage, albeit a dangerous one, with the unstable structures posing a significant safety risk for anyone who decides to climb on it. Yeah, don't do that. Number 9. Hearnden Stadium in Georgia. Hearnden Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia is a site that's rich with history and was once a center of athletic excellence. It's located on the campus of Morris Brown College, which is a historically African-American college that was founded in 1881 and was named after Alonzo F. Hearnden, who was an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. Built in 1948, Hearnden Stadium was designed as a multi-purpose venue for Morris Brown College's sports teams, particularly for its football. The stadium had a seating capacity of around 15,000 people, and it was used for more than just athletic events, too, as a gathering place for a local community, and over the decades it's hosted college games, high school sports, and community celebrations. The stadium's greatest moment on the world stage came during the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, when it was used as a field hockey venue. As part of the city's preparations for the games, Hearnden Stadium received some upgrades, including new facilities and renovations to meet the international standards. The post-Olympics era, though, would bring challenges that would lead to the stadium's decline. By the early 2000s, Morris Brown College faced a severe financial crisis, losing its accreditation in 2002 due to mismanagement and mounting debt. The loss of accreditation caused a sharp drop in student enrollment, which cut off a vital source of revenue for the college. As the college struggled to stay afloat, Hearnden Stadium was left to deteriorate. Grass and weeds began to overtake the field, the seating areas fell into disrepair, and the structure started to crumble. By the late 2000s, the stadium was effectively abandoned. This was a loss for the community and the college, having been a space that represented achievement, resilience, and unity, particularly for Atlanta's African-American people. In the years since its abandonment, despite now having an overgrown field and graffiti-covered walls, community leaders and alumni of Morris Brown College have shown interest in restoring the site. Morris Brown College regained its accreditation in 2021, and with the potential for more funding, there have been conversations about restoring Hearnden Stadium. So it's possible that in the coming years, it could well be restored to its former glory. Number 8. The Shuni Olympic Rowing Canoe Park in Beijing, China. The Shuni Olympic Rowing Canoe Park was a state-of-the-art facility that was built for the 2008 Summer Olympic Games. Designed to host rowing, canoe sprint, and open water swimming events, the park was an important venue in Beijing's plans to create an unforgettable Olympics. It's located in the Shuni district, which is around 25 miles or 40 kilometers from central Beijing, and the park covered an area of almost 400 acres and featured a 6,500-foot or 2,000-meter-long competition course, a warm-up area, and a finishing tower. This facility had seating for 37,000 spectators, with plenty of further space for athletes and officials. The design kept strictly to international standards, with attention paid to water flow, depth, and safety, and this meant that it cost an estimated $90 million to build. During the 2008 Olympics, it proved to be the perfect venue for the rowing races and canoe sprints that were broadcast around the world. It is a picturesque setting, with mountains in the background and a calm artificial lake. But once the Olympics ended, though, the venue quickly began to encounter problems. Rowing and canoeing are niche sports in China, with limited local interest from athletes or even from spectators. And while some initial efforts were made to host international competitions and national training camps, these weren't enough to justify the park's expansive scale. Its remote location in the Shuni district made things worse, and this made it more difficult for the venue to attract visitors and participants. And by the early 2010s, the site had fallen into disuse. The once pristine waterways became stagnant, and the spectator stands fell into disrepair. Weeds overtook the surrounding areas, and the infrastructure began to crumble. Despite the decline, though, there have been occasional calls to repurpose or revitalize the park, and some have suggested transforming it into a recreational area for local residents, while others have proposed converting parts of the facility for other sporting activities. Moving on to number 7, the Cesana Perol Bobsleigh Track, Turin, Italy. The Cesana Perol Bobsleigh Track, which was built for the 2006 Winter Olympics in Turin, is in the Italian Alps near the town of Cesana Torinese. Built specifically to host bobsleigh, luge, and skeleton events, it had a sleek design and advanced cooling systems that promised a world-class Olympic experience. At a cost of approximately $125 million, this facility was a state-of-the-art structure designed to meet international standards for speed and safety. With a length of over 4,700 feet or 1,400 meters, it featured a vertical drop of 374 feet or 114 meters and 19 curves, providing a challenging course for athletes. During the 2006 Olympics, the track delivered record-breaking performances and dramatic finishes, and with a backdrop of snow-covered peaks and dense forests, it seemed certain that the track would become a long-term part of Italy's winter sports. The facility's high operating costs, though, estimated around $2 million a year, soon became a major problem. Maintaining the ice track required expensive refrigeration systems and constant upkeep, even during the off-season. Following the Olympics, the track saw limited use for international competitions and training camps, and by 2011, just 5 years after the Olympics, the track was officially closed due to increasing financial losses and lack of a sustainable use. Despite its abandoned state now, the track does remain an object of fascination for urban explorers and sports history enthusiasts who see it as a relic of Olympic ambition and a cautionary tale, and have also kept interest in it alive to the point where there have been several attempts to renovate it. But with the cost of this being in the tens of millions of dollars, though, and no clear idea about who would use it if this were to be done, it seems like the track is destined to be forgotten about, and in a few decades' time, there'll barely be any trace left of it. Number 6, the Hearnden Olympic Softball Stadium. The Hearnden Olympic Softball Stadium, which was built for the 2004 Summer Olympics in Athens, Greece, was designed as a state-of-the-art venue for one of the game's newest sports. The stadium was constructed on the site of the former Hearnden International Airport and was part of a larger complex that included facilities for baseball, hockey, and other sports. The stadium featured seating for around 4,800 spectators and was equipped with modern features to meet international standards. During the Olympics, it hosted softball matches, giving a great platform for teams from around the globe and celebrating the sport, which had debuted at the 1996 Atlanta Games. The Games themselves were a moment of national pride for Greece, marking the return of the Olympics to where they had originated, and the softball stadium was an exciting part of that, as it introduced the relatively new sport to Greek audiences. After the 2004 Olympics, the softball stadium quickly fell into disuse, though. Plans to repurpose the stadium for use as a local sports activities never really happened, mainly due to a combination of financial issues and logistical challenges. Any chances of keeping it as a venue were gone by 2009, when Greece was plunged into a severe debt crisis, which forced the government to implement austerity measures and cut spending across the board. Today, it lies abandoned, overgrown with weeds and showing visible signs of decay. There's the acceptance that softball will never make a comeback at the site, but even other plans, like trying to turn the area into a major urban park and mixed-use development, have been slow to progress because of bureaucracy, political disputes, and of course funding issues. This softball stadium, along with other venues in the complex, remains in limbo, awaiting a clear direction for its future. It could be a very long time until anything is decided. Number 5, the Igman Olympic Jumps in Sarajevo. The Igman Olympic Jumps, which is on Mount Igman near Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina, were built to host the 1984 Winter Olympic ski jumping and Nordic combined events. This event symbolized international cooperation and the potential for unity in a diverse multi-ethnic nation, and the Igman Olympic Jumps were built as a part of an effort to create state-of-the-art facilities costing millions of dollars. This included 2 ski jumps, the K112 and K90, with spectator seating, judges' towers, and training facilities, all with a stunning alpine setting. During the Olympics, the Igman Jumps became a focal point, and the events there were a resounding success. Following the Games, though, this all soon faded away. The social troubles in the country in the 1990s, such as the Bosnian War, meant that Sarajevo became a city under siege. The Igman Olympic jumps overlooking the city were heavily damaged during the war, with the surrounding area becoming a battlefield and the jumps being used as military outposts by Bosnian Serb forces. After the war, though, Bosnia and Herzegovina faced the task of rebuilding a country that had been devastated by conflict. The site, which is now in a state of disrepair, was abandoned, and nature began to reclaim the area. Despite its abandonment, the Igman Olympic jumps hold deep symbolic and historical importance, representing the heights of Olympic glory and the events that soon followed after. Over the years, the site has drawn urban explorers, historians, and former athletes who've competed there and want to relive their greatest moments. Number 4. The Montreal Olympic Stadium in Canada. The Montreal Olympic Stadium, which was built for the 1976 Summer Olympics, was seen as the grand centerpiece of the Games and a lasting symbol of Canada's place in international sport. Known as the Big O because of its donut-shaped roof, the stadium was designed by French architect Roger Talabert. But things proved to be tricky right from the start because of difficulties in its construction, huge costs, and limited options for it once the Games were over. It was meant to be a multi-purpose facility with a retractable roof and a leaning tower, which would later become a Montreal landmark. The stadium was meant to host the opening and closing ceremonies, athletic competitions, and soccer matches during the Olympics, with a capacity of over 56,000. Construction delays, labor strikes, and cost overruns happened throughout the stadium's development. The total cost of the stadium skyrocketed from an initial estimate of $134 million to over $1.1 billion, which made it one of the most expensive stadiums ever built at the time. The '76 Olympics themselves were a financial disaster for Montreal, leaving the city with a debt that took 30 years to pay off. While the Games were celebrated for their athletic displays, such as Nadia Comaneci's historic Perfect 10 in gymnastics, the financial burden cast a long shadow over that legacy. At first, it became the home of Major League Baseball's Montreal Expos and the Canadian Football League's Montreal Alouettes for several decades, but its design wasn't well suited for those sports. Its huge size, poor sightlines made it unpopular with fans, and its maintenance cost remains extraordinarily high. The retractable roof, which was finally installed in 1987, had technical issues and often required expensive repairs, and a replacement roof that was installed in 1998 also proved problematic. Despite all the limited uses, though, the stadium's maintenance costs continued to fall to the city, and it required millions of dollars each year for upkeep, with little or no return on investment. Structural issues, including concerns about the integrity of the roof, further complicated its use, and it became a symbol of Montreal's Olympic debt and mismanagement, with the stadium now just occasionally hosting large-scale events, and nothing like what had originally been planned for it. Number 3. The Fisht Olympic Stadium in Sochi, Russia. The Fisht Olympic Stadium was the centerpiece of the 2014 Winter Olympics. Named after Mount Fisht, which is in the Caucasus Mountains, the stadium was designed as a multi-purpose venue and is where the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics were held, as well as several high-profile matches during the 2018 FIFA World Cup. Since then, though, it's hardly been used at all. When it was first revealed, the Fisht Olympic Stadium was an impressive structure. Designed by Popoulos and Burohapold to resemble a snow-capped mountain, it had seating capacity of about 40,000 people and had a translucent polycarbonate roof, which allowed for light to beam in while providing protection from the elements. During the 2014 Winter Olympics, the stadium was the focal point of international attention, hosting ceremonies that featured displays of Russian culture and history. Unlike many winter game venues, though, which focus on alpine and ice sports, Fisht was built as a stadium really without a clear purpose afterwards. Following the Olympics, the Russian government repurposed Fisht for the 2018 FIFA World Cup, and this saw the stadium undergoing significant renovations. It served as a venue for several games during the tournament, including a quarter-final match, and temporarily putting it back in the spotlight. Well, unlike other stadiums used for soccer, Fisht was not assigned to a club in the Russian Premier League, and this meant that it was only used for occasional matches, concerts, and public events. As with many large-scale venues, the operational expenses are high, especially with it being used so little. So over time, the stadium began to show signs of neglect, with maintenance issues and a lack of modernization further restricting its appeal. Efforts have been made to find new uses for the Fisht, and it's occasionally hosted national team matches and events like the Russian Cup Final. It's also been suggested as a potential venue for international sports events on large-scale entertainment shows, but with Russia now being cut off from the rest of the world because of political decisions, it seems unlikely that the fortunes of the stadium are going to turn around anytime soon. Number 2. Trampolino Olympico, Italy. The Trampolino Olympico was a ski jump that was built for the 1956 Winter Olympics in Cortina d'Ampezzo in Italy. Set in the heart of the Dolomite Mountains, it was one of the most recognizable structures of the Games, and it drew huge crowds during the events. Cortina d'Ampezzo had been chosen to host the 1956 Winter Olympic Games as Italy's first ever Winter Games. The town, which was already a popular destination for alpine sports, saw the Olympics as an opportunity to put itself on the world stage. The ski jump was designed with a K-point of 236 feet or 72 meters and had a stunning alpine backdrop. It included seatings for thousands of spectators, a judge's tower, and facilities for athletes and officials. And during the game, the venue hosted some of the most dramatic moments, with skiers soaring through the sky. Ultimately, though, the 1956 Winter Olympics were seen as a major success for this place, with the Trampolino Olympico in particular becoming an iconic image of the Games, having shown the best in ski jumping talent. For a short period of time after the Olympics, it continued to be used for national and international events, drawing athletes and fans from across Europe, and everything was looking good for it in the long term. As the decades went on, though, it began to lose its charm and special status. Advances in ski jump design and safety standards meant that the venue became outdated, and newer jumps with larger K-points and more advanced facilities became the norm. By the 1970s, the Trampolino Olympico was overshadowed by modern ski jumping facilities in other parts of Europe. Ski jumping as a sport has seen a fall in popularity in Italy, with fewer athletes and local competitions, so with little incentive to invest in the jump, the venue was abandoned by the 1980s. There have been discussions about restoring it, though, particularly as Cortina d'Ampezzo has been chosen to co-host the 2026 Winter Olympics alongside Milan. Some have proposed rehabilitating the site as a historical landmark or transforming it into a visitor attraction, but the high costs of restoration and the limited use of an outdated ski jump mean that this is unlikely to happen, especially as brand new facilities are being built elsewhere. Number 1. Fulton County Stadium in Georgia. Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia was a major part of sporting life in the city, as a place where baseball, football, and other major events could be hosted, and it also became part of the 1996 Summer Olympics. Built in 1965 as a multi-purpose stadium, it was instrumental in putting Atlanta on the map as a sports city. But now, very little trace remains of it. Fulton County Stadium, which was originally named Atlanta Stadium, was built to attract professional sports teams to Atlanta, which at the time was trying to establish itself as a major urban area in the Southeast. Completed in just over a year, the stadium featured a circular utilitarian design that was typical of mid-century multi-purpose venues. And with a seating capacity of around 52,000, it was designed to be ideal for both Major League Baseball and National Football League games. Atlanta's successful bid to host the 1996 Summer Olympics then also looked good for Fulton County Stadium. Even though it wasn't going to be the main Olympic venue, it played an important role in the Games as a venue for Olympic baseball, which was a sport that made its official debut at the Games that year. The stadium hosted various baseball games, including the gold medal match, which saw Cuba defeat Japan in a historic match. Fulton County Stadium will be remembered for many unforgettable moments, ensuring its place in sports history. The most famous was probably Hank Aaron's 715th career home run on April 8, 1974, which broke Babe Ruth's long-standing record. The historic moment, celebrated by fans across the world, made the stadium synonymous with baseball greatness and civil rights progress, as Aaron overcame significant adversity to achieve that milestone. The Braves' success in the 1990s brought new life to the stadium, and the team won their only World Series at a Fulton County Stadium game in 1995, defeating the Cleveland Indians. By the 1990s, Fulton County Stadium was becoming outdated, though, as its generic multi-purpose design was once considered versatile. It no longer meets the demands of modern sports teams and fans. The 1996 Olympics was then the final chapter of Fulton County Stadium. After hosting Olympic baseball, it was abandoned in favor of Turner Field. Now, Turner Field was designed with the intention of converting it into a baseball-specific stadium for the Braves after the Games. Fulton County Stadium was demolished in 1997, and its site was repurposed as a parking lot for Turner Field. Today, only a small section of the stadium's outfield and wall remain, commemorating Hank Aaron's historic 715th home run, and a plaque and markers on the ground preserve the memory of the stadium's most iconic moments. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel members.